that he's known they've been used, and there's mounting evidence to prove it. Congressman Mike Rogers is chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and joins us right now. Chairman, you think you know what the Swedish scientist is going to find, don't you?
Well, they're investigating a specific event. When you look at the body of information and evidence over the last 2 years through intelligence reports, it's very clear to me, and a high probability, that a small quantity of chemical weapons has been used, and they've put the weapons in a position to be used and expressed intent to use. All of that is really concerning and quite destabilizing to the region.
But we've already set a red line. If they're used, we have to act. What does that mean? What should it mean?
Well, you know, the U.S. has special capabilities, so no one should think that this means the 101st Airborne Division and troops on the ground. None of that needs to happen. We need to use small groups with special capabilities, and we do have the ability to render the use of those weapons improbable moving forward. And my argument is, listen, if we know they have it, and that is undisputed by the international community, including Syria, we believe they have this intention to use. We think that they've used a small quantity within the last 2 years. Shouldn't we use what capabilities we have to make sure that they don't compound the 70,000 deaths with a chemical weapon exchange here that would be a humanitarian disaster? And the refugee problem is already destabilizing our allies in the Middle East. I mean, this thing is growing more complicated and more dangerous. National security interests, and indecision is as dangerous as getting this thing wrong, and we need to move forward in a smart and small way so that it's not a big and ugly way later.
Well, there's a few things going on here. Number one, where is the world outrage about this? If it's there, it's being whispered rather than shouted, and can we combine with somebody in order to not be embroiled in another Middle East war?
Well, we don't want to be embroiled, but here's the problem. So there's two sets of problems here. They have a huge stockpile of chemical weapons and a huge stockpile of very sophisticated conventional weapons. If we learned nothing from Libya is you can't just topple the regime and hope for the best. That doesn't work. And so if you want a diplomatic solution so there isn't this mass chaos, you have to have the credibility with the opposition and the Arab League, and we have neither right now. So the opposition didn't even want to meet with our Secretary of State. They're so frustrated, and the Arab League has been, and I meet them a lot, saying, hey, what are you guys doing? We need your leadership at the table. They don't need our military. They just need some of our special capabilities in a very small and limited way.
Talking about training possibly the rebels, who, by the way, got a seat at the Arab League, not the Assad government. Fascinating. Now let's move on to a report the AP and Jennifer Griffin wrote yesterday, FoxNews.com, that in Jordan we are training selected rebels to fight this fight against the Assad government. What can you tell us about this?
I can't comment on any operations that may be or may not be happening in Jordan. But one thing that we do know is that the rebels that we need to be working with don't want to leave the country for any type of training. And so that's why many of us, in a bipartisan way, by the way, in both the Senate and the House, have called for a safe area in the north where they can be trained in Syria, and that would be led by the Arab League and United States assistance in doing that. So you could train them, equip them, and give them intelligence packages so they could be much more impactful.
Sadly, the al-Nusra, which I understand is a outshoot of al-Qaeda, is actually winning respect among the Syrian rebels because they filled a vacuum the West, the U.S. specifically, did not fill over the last 2 years. They are in position to get power should Assad go, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And what's concerning to our allies, Israel and others, is that it's not just in the hundreds anymore, these al-Qaeda fighters. It's in the thousands. And they've attached themselves to these secular units, and they're the only ones that show up equipped, trained, and really committed to the fight. So these commanders have been more reliant on these al-Qaeda, al-Nusra front members, and that is really dangerous stuff, knowing that when Assad falls, there's going to be some chaos. Think of all of those dangerous weapons that could proliferate across the Levant, across the Middle East, Southern Europe. That's why there's so many people in a bipartisan way in Congress saying, hey, we don't need to be there in a big way, but we need to be there in a smart way so we don't have the same problem we had in Libya, which all of those guns had caused trouble in Mali and other places around northern Africa.
That's why you spent some quality time with us to explain to the American people our options. Chairman Mike Rogers, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
And paying the price for inaction.